When you are looking for the truth, if that is your end goal, you will find it eventually. It might take you a number of years. It might not take you very long to find truth in some things. But if you're diligent, if you're meditative on it, if you're scrupulous, when new information comes to the surface, then you eventually will find the truth. What you do with the truth is your prerogative. What galvanized me into making this video was a quote that I found in the Benjamin Franklin biography, which was written by Benjamin Franklin himself. I looked in the reference page and did a little bit more research. I found out that this quote, in fact, was real and was from Franklin himself. And this quote, which I will read to you, is very interesting because it creates a rabbit hole of information. And this is what he said. Quote, "The colonies would gladly have borne the little tax on tea and other matters had it not been that England took away from the colonies their money, which created unemployment and dissatisfaction. The inability of the colonists to get power to issue their own money permanently out of the hands of George III and the international bankers was the prime, capital letters, prime reason for the Revolutionary War." I looked this up and this was a real quote. So the question becomes, what does he mean by the colonies' money? If you look in the Library of Congress, you look on Wikipedia, you read some news articles, you will find out that the colonial scrip was the currency the colonies were using before the Revolutionary War. Another quote by Franklin, "There was abundance in the colonies, and peace was reigning on every border. It was difficult and even impossible to find a happier and more prosperous nation on all the surface of the globe. Comfort was prevailing in every home. The people in general kept the highest moral standards, and education was widely spread." That's another quote from Benjamin Franklin. Before the war, the colonies sent Benjamin Franklin to England to represent their interest. Franklin was greatly surprised by the amount of poverty and high unemployment. It just didn't make sense. England was the richest country in the world, but the working class was impoverished. He wrote, "The streets are covered with beggars and tramps." He asked his friends in England, how could this be so? They replied they had too many workers. Many of them believed that wars and plague were necessary to rid the country from the manpower surplus. The colonies had no unemployment. When asked why the working class in the colonies was so prosperous, that is simple. In the colonies, we issue our own paper money. It's called colonial scrip. We issue it in proper proportion to make the goods pass easily from the producers to the consumers. In this manner, creating ourselves our own paper money, we control its purchasing power, and we have no interest to pay no one. And that's what Benjamin Franklin said. Soon afterward, the English bankers demanded that the king and parliament pass a law that prohibited the colonies from using the scrip money. Only gold and silver could be used, which would be provided by the English bankers. This began the plague of debt-based money in the colonies that had cursed the English working class. The first law was passed in 1751, and then a harsher law passed in 1763. Franklin claimed that within 1 year, the colonies were filled with unemployment and beggars, just like in England, because there was not enough money to pay for the goods and work. The money supply had been cut in half. That's because the banks, the elites, control gold and silver. If your currency is backed up by gold and silver, and the elites control all of the precious minerals, they control this money supply. Not only that, but you have to pay back debt. Our entire economy is based upon debt right now because of the international bankers. When you have to pay back money based upon debt, your entire system is built upon debt like a house of cards. Even to this day, the Bank of England holds around 400,000 bars of gold, which is worth over 200 billion. The New York Federal Reserve has the most. And of course, the Federal Reserve prints our money at interest, loans it to banks, and you have to pay back that interest, which makes us further go into debt. So the more money you print, the more debt you go into. The reason that the elites have all the gold and silver is because of the abundance of the element in the Earth's crust. The way they measure it is in parts per million. Gold is the rarest at 0.004 parts per million, and silver is at 0.075 parts per million. The elites control it, they hoard it, and then they control the money supply. That's what they were doing back then. Now it's just straight up paper money. It's printed out of thin air, but back then they wanted the United States to be on the gold standard, controlled by the Rothschilds and international bankers of England. That's why I disagree with the gold standard. We should just print our own money like Lincoln did with the greenbacks during the Civil War to pay for the war, have no Federal Reserve, have no interest, and let the government, states, and local economies regulate that. If you look deep into the Revolutionary War, that was the main reason, directly said by Franklin himself. And you even had other quotes by founders, like Thomas Jefferson, who said bankers are worse than standing armies. They're more dangerous for a nation. The founders understood that a nation had to be able to print its own currency in order to survive. But that's the real reason, is because the colonies wanted to print their own money, the international scrip. The colonial scrip, rather. Everything else was just a culmination. Lexington and Concord were the culmination of all these different factors taking place. But next time you want to tell somebody about the truth about the Revolutionary War, tell them the main reason was the colonial scrip, and then see what type of response you get.